The jungle of Vera stretched as far as the eye could see. Giant trees rose high above the ground, their roots twisting across the soil like the arms of ancient guardians. Bright vines draped from branches, swaying with the faint breeze while hidden creatures whispered in the undergrowth. It was a place of beauty, but also of danger. Every sound carried a warning. Every shadow could hide teeth, and every step might bring death. Rava moved through the dense green world with the confidence of a seasoned huntress. Her tall frame glided between trees as silently as a shadow. The weapon in her hand gleamed faintly in the filtered light that slipped through the leaves. Her people were known across many worlds as strong and fearless. To them, hunting was not just survival. It was pride. It was honor. And Rava was one of the best among them. Her sharp eyes tracked the creature ahead. A four-legged beast with scales like iron darted between the trees. Its tail ended in a barbed stinger, dripping with venom that could fell even the largest predator. Rava's heart beat steady. She had faced worse. The beast tried to lose her among the thick growth, but she moved faster, narrowing the distance with each step. She leapt over a fallen log, landed softly, and raised her weapon. She aimed for the gap behind its armored head. The creature sensed danger and spun, its tail whipping forward in a deadly arc. Rava dodged, but the stinger grazed her side. Pain exploded across her ribs. She stumbled but forced her body forward, driving her blade into the beast's throat. With a choking hiss, it collapsed, its legs twitching before it fell still. For a moment she stood over it victorious, her breath steady but her side burning. She pressed a hand against the wound. The stinger had not cut deep, but the venom had entered her blood. Already her skin tingled and her muscles felt heavy. She gritted her teeth. Many hunters carried scars from such encounters, yet few survived the venom. Rava tried to step forward, but her legs weakened. The jungle seemed to spin around her. The proud huntress, who had never known fear, felt a shiver crawl through her chest. She would not let death take her here. She would not be remembered as the one who fell to a single beast. She forced her body onward, one step at a time, dragging her feet across the tangled roots. The jungle grew louder in her ears. Insects hummed like a rising storm. Her vision blurred, shapes twisting into shadows. She stumbled into a clearing, falling to her knees. Her weapon slipped from her hand and struck the ground. She tried to rise, but her strength failed. Her body felt heavy, like stone pressing against her chest. Rava's breathing grew ragged. She realized she was alone, far from her people, with no one to call for aid. The venom spread deeper, dulling her senses. For the first time in her life, the huntress thought she might truly die. Her pride told her to accept it with dignity. Yet somewhere in her fading mind, a small voice whispered that she was not ready. As darkness crept into her vision, a sound reached her ears. Not the growl of a beast, nor the hiss of insects. It was softer. The sound of footsteps. Someone was moving through the clearing. Rava forced her heavy eyes open. Through the blur she saw a figure, smaller than her, dressed in simple gear, carrying no weapon she recognized. The figure paused when it saw her collapsed on the ground. Rava's fading mind struggled to understand. The figure was human. The human stepped closer, his eyes widening as he took in the scene. He could see the dead beast lying in the shadows and the wounded huntress fighting for breath. His name was Thomas, though Rava did not know it yet. He was an explorer, traveling the edges of unknown worlds with little more than survival tools and curiosity. Compared to her people, he was fragile. Yet in this moment he looked at her not with fear, but with determination. Thomas knelt beside her. His hands moved quickly, checking her wound. He saw the mark of the stinger, the dark lines spreading from it. He recognized the signs of venom, and his mind raced. He had studied survival techniques across many lands, though never on this exact world. Still, he knew enough. If he acted fast, she might live. If not, she would die before the sun set. Rava tried to speak, but her voice came out weak. She wanted to tell him to leave her, to save himself from the danger of the jungle, yet the words would not form. Her pride fought against her weakness. She did not want this fragile being to see her helpless. But her body no longer obeyed her will. Thomas saw the strength fading from her eyes, and he made his choice. He pressed his hand against her wound, trying to slow the spread of poison. He had no tools strong enough to extract it. Only one method remained, a dangerous one, but the only chance she had. He bent his head, placed his lips near the wound, and began to draw the venom out. The taste was bitter, burning, but he spat it away at once, repeating the act until the dark lines near her wound faded slightly. He knew he could not remove all of it, but even a little would give her a chance. Each moment risked his own health, yet he did not hesitate. His mind was clear. He could not let someone die when he had the power to act. Rava felt the pressure against her wound. Through the haze of poison, she realized what he was doing. Her people would never imagine such an act. To them, it was unthinkable to risk oneself for another in this way. Yet here was a human, a fragile creature from a world long dismissed, giving his strength to save her. When at last Thomas pulled back, his face pale from effort, Rava's breathing steadied. The burning in her veins lessened. Her vision cleared enough to see him clearly for the first time. He looked exhausted, sweat dripping from his brow, but his eyes held calm resolve. For a long moment, the jungle was silent around them. The only sound was her breathing, steady once more. Rava stared at the human, her pride shaken, her mind filled with questions she could not yet ask. She had been ready to die, yet this being had not let her. She tried to speak again, and this time her voice, though weak, carried through the clearing. "Why," she whispered, "would you do this?" Tomas met her gaze. His answer was simple. Because life should not be wasted. The words struck her deeper than the venom had. She, a huntress of great renown, had been saved not by strength of arms or pride of her people, but by the compassion of a human. As the shadows of the jungle closed in around them once more, Rava realized her world had changed forever. The jungle of Vera slowly quieted after the battle with the beast. The air hung heavy with the scent of sap and damp soil. Rava lay on the ground, her chest rising and falling with effort, but the sharp grip of poison in her blood had weakened. Thomas sat close beside her, his breathing rough, his face pale with exhaustion. He had acted on instinct, not on strength, and his choice had saved her life. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Rava's mind struggled to make sense of what had just happened. Her people were raised with the belief that survival came only through strength, skill, and pride. To rely on others was weakness. To be rescued was shame. Yet this human, whom her kind often dismissed as fragile, had placed himself at risk for her without hesitation. Rava forced herself to sit upright. Her body trembled, but she would not let weakness show for long. She pressed a hand against her wound and looked at Thomas with sharp eyes. He met her gaze calmly. He did not look proud of what he had done, nor did he look afraid of her. He looked steady, as though saving her was nothing more than what had to be done. "You should not have done that," Rava said, her voice low and harsh. Tomas shook his head. "You would have died." "It was not your fight," she replied. "It was my hunt, my battle, my life." Thomas leaned back slightly, resting against the trunk of a tree. His voice was quiet but firm. "Life is life. If someone is in danger and I can help, I will. That is all." His words unsettled her more than the venom had. Among her people, such a statement would sound foolish. They believed only the strong deserved survival. The weak were left behind. Yet this human seemed to believe every life had worth, even hers when she could no longer fight. The huntress looked at him closely. His frame was smaller than hers, his muscles lean rather than powerful. His gear was simple, built for travel, not war. His hands bore the calluses of labor, not the scars of battle. Yet his eyes carried something she could not name. Not pride, not fear, something steadier. The silence stretched between them until the jungle broke it with the distant cry of another beast. Thomas stood. "You cannot stay here. More creatures will come." "Can you walk?" Rava bristled at the question. She hated the idea of appearing weak before anyone, least of all a human. She forced herself to rise, using the strength that remained in her legs. Pain flared in her side, but she locked her jaw and refused to fall. "I can walk," she said firmly. Thomas nodded as though he had expected nothing less. He did not offer his hand, nor did he try to guide her. He simply began moving toward the trees, checking the ground with careful eyes. Rava followed, her pride holding her upright even as her body begged for rest. The path wound through tangled roots and thick vines. Thomas cut through the brush with a simple blade, clearing the way. He moved with surprising skill for someone who seemed more traveler than warrior. His steps were cautious but not clumsy. He knew how to read the signs of the forest, when to pause and listen, when to move quickly, when to crouch low. Rava studied him as they walked. Her people believed humans were weak, too fragile for the harsh worlds of the galaxy. Yet this one had crossed the wilds of Vera alone. He had faced beasts larger than himself. He had saved her life with nothing but his own will. Perhaps humans were not what she had been told. As night began to fall, Thomas found a small clearing beside a stream. He set down his pack and began preparing a fire. Rava stood nearby, silent, watching him work. She wanted to believe she did not need him, but the truth pressed against her chest. The venom had left her weaker than she cared to admit. Without his fire, without his knowledge of the forest, she would not last the night. Thomas built the fire carefully, using dry wood and kindling from his pack. Soon a small flame flickered to life, pushing back the shadows of the jungle. The sound of insects and distant beasts echoed through the dark, but the fire gave them a circle of safety. Rava lowered herself to the ground across from him, her weapon resting near her side. She kept her posture straight, unwilling to show weakness even in rest. Thomas reached into his pack and pulled out simple food, dried fruit, bread, and strips of meat. He offered some to her without a word. Rava hesitated. To take food from another was a sign of dependence, a mark of weakness. Yet her body ached with hunger. She accepted it with a curt nod, her pride warring with her need. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving him. Finally, she spoke. "You risked yourself for me. You gave me your strength." Why? Thomas looked up from the fire. "Because it was the right thing to do." "Right," Rava repeated, tasting the word. To her people, right and wrong were measured only in strength and survival. The idea that saving a stranger, even at great risk, could be right was strange. Thomas nodded. "If we turn away when someone needs help, what does that make us?" "Weakness is not in helping. Weakness is in refusing." The firelight flickered across Rava's face. She felt something stir in her chest, something unfamiliar. His words carried no boast, no demand. They were simple, yet they struck her deeply. She had lived her life proving her strength through battle. Yet here was a human showing strength in a way she had never considered. That night, as the fire burned low and the jungle whispered around them, Rava lay awake. Her body needed rest, but her mind was restless. She thought of the moment she had collapsed, the venom coursing through her blood. She thought of the human kneeling beside her, risking his own life for hers. And she thought of the words he had spoken, words that would not leave her. When morning came, the jungle was alive with color once more. Birds with bright feathers soared overhead. The air was fresh with the scent of rain. Thomas was already awake, packing his gear. Rava rose slowly, testing her strength. She felt stronger than before, though still not fully healed. Thomas glanced at her. "We should move. This place is not safe." Rava picked up her weapon and stood tall. "I will walk." He gave a small nod, and together they left the clearing. The jungle awaited, filled with new dangers and new questions. Rava no longer saw the human as she once had. He was not weak. He was not fragile. He was something else entirely. And as they moved deeper into the wild, she knew this was only the beginning. The sun of Vera rose bright through the canopy, turning the leaves into sheets of gold. Mist curled between the trees, clinging to vines and roots. Birds called from above, their cries sharp and high. The jungle was alive, restless, and always watching. Rava moved through it with her weapon in hand, her steps strong, though her side still ached from the venom. Thomas followed close, his blade cutting through vines when the way grew too thick. Neither spoke for a long time. The silence was not empty. It was heavy with unspoken thoughts. Rava could not bring herself to thank him for what he had done. Her pride resisted the words, but her mind replayed the memory of his act. She had seen many warriors fall to venom. None had ever been saved by such a method. None would believe her story if she told it. Finally, she broke the silence. "You should not have risked yourself. The venom could have taken you as well." Thomas glanced at her without stopping. "I knew the risk. I also knew doing nothing would end your life." "You are reckless," Rava said. He gave a small shrug. "Maybe, but you are alive." The words struck her again, simple and steady, carrying no boast. She narrowed her eyes. "You act as if saving me was nothing." "It was not nothing," Thomas replied, "but it was necessary." "That is enough." Rava walked ahead, her jaw tight. Among her people, honor was won through battle, through great feats of strength. Thomas had shown no strength of body, yet she lived because of him. It unsettled her. She did not know how to place this act within the ways of her people. As they moved deeper into the jungle, Thomas paused often to study the ground, the broken branches, the marks of claws. He read the signs of the land with careful attention. Rava watched him with curiosity she tried to hide. He did not move like a warrior, yet he survived as if the forest itself guided him. They stopped by a stream to rest. The water ran clear over smooth stones, carrying leaves down into the distance. Rava crouched to drink, her reflection rippling across the surface. Thomas sat nearby, pulling fruit from his pack. He cut it with his blade and handed half to her. She took it but asked, "Why do you keep offering food to me? Do you think I cannot hunt for myself?" "You are still healing," he said simply. "Your strength will return, but not yet. Sharing food is easier than watching you starve." Her eyes narrowed. "I do not starve." "Not yet," Thomas said, taking a bite of his share. "But poison steals more than breath. It steals strength. Better to eat than to pretend you do not need to." Rava's pride bristled, but hunger won. She ate, her sharp eyes never leaving him. His calmness irritated her, yet it also stirred something else. Respect. After they ate, she asked, "What kind of man are you?" "My people say humans are weak. They say you are soft and break easily." Thomas chuckled softly. "Maybe some do. But weakness is not always what it looks like. We survive in other ways." "In other ways," Rava repeated. "What ways?" "Ingenuity," Thomas said. "Cooperation, curiosity. We are not the strongest or the fastest, but we learn. We adapt." Rava considered his words. Adaptation was not the way of her people. They faced the world with strength alone. They did not bend. They did not change. To hear that humans survived through learning unsettled her even more. She asked, "Why did you come to this world?" "It is dangerous. Even hunters of my people die here." Thomas looked at the stream, watching the water flow. "Because the unknown calls to me. I explore because there is always something new to learn. Every world teaches something. Every life holds a lesson." His words carried no arrogance, no pride. They were spoken with the same calmness he had shown since she first saw him. Rava could not understand such a way of thinking. To her, a world was a place to conquer, to claim through strength. To him, it was a place to learn. Later that day, they moved again, following a trail that wound between massive roots. A storm gathered above, dark clouds rolling across the sky. The jungle grew darker, the wind carrying the smell of rain. Rava's senses sharpened. Storms drew predators from their hiding places. She gripped her weapon tighter. When the rain came, it poured hard, turning the ground to mud. Thunder rolled across the sky. They found shelter beneath a massive tree whose roots formed a natural cave. Inside it was dark but dry. Thomas started another fire while Rava kept watch at the entrance. The storm raged outside, lightning splitting the sky. Rava stood tall, her eyes on the jungle, but her mind was not calm. She felt the weight of what Tomas had said earlier. Curiosity, cooperation, adaptation. Words that carried strength, yet not the kind she had been taught. She turned to him suddenly. "Why did you not fear me? When you found me lying there, you could have run." "Many would have." Thomas placed a log on the fire. "Because fear helps no one in a moment like that. If I had run, you would be dead. If I had feared, I would have done nothing. I chose action instead." Rava stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. "You speak as though fear does not touch you." "It touches everyone," he answered. "The difference is whether you let it control you." His words unsettled her again. She had been raised to crush fear through strength. He seemed to face it by accepting it, then choosing another path. It was different, but it worked. That night, as the storm calmed, they sat by the fire. Rava studied Thomas in silence. His presence disturbed her pride, but it also drew her curiosity. He was not what she expected a human to be. He was something else, something she could not yet name. At last she spoke. "You confuse me, human. You act with no thought for yourself, yet you survive. You claim weakness, yet you live among dangers. You are not strong as my people are, yet you endure. Tell me, what truly makes your kind endure when stronger species fall?" Thomas looked at her across the fire, the flames lighting his steady eyes. "Because we never stop trying. Even when the world says we cannot win, we try again. That is what makes us endure." The words settled deep within her. For the first time in her life, Rava felt her pride bend. She did not like the feeling, yet she could not deny it. This human, small and fragile in body, carried a strength she had never seen before. When she lay down to rest, the storm outside had passed, but another storm brewed inside her. A storm of pride and curiosity. She had always known her place in the galaxy, but now she was no longer certain. The human had changed something within her, and she could not turn away from it. The morning after the storm was still and heavy. Water dripped from the leaves above, and the ground was soft with mud. The air smelled of wet earth and hidden life. Rava and Thomas left the shelter of the tree roots and began their way deeper into the jungle. Their steps were slow, cautious, for they both sensed the silence around them was not natural. Rava's sharp eyes scanned the shadows. She felt the weight of something unseen moving within the forest. Predators were near. She rested her hand on her weapon, her body tense. Thomas moved beside her, calm but alert, reading the ground for signs. Broken branches, tracks in the mud, claw marks on a tree. Finally, Rava spoke in a low voice. "We are being hunted," Thomas nodded. "I know," she looked at him with surprise. "You knew and you still walk as if nothing waits for us," he answered. "Fear makes us careless. Calm gives us choices." The words reminded her of their talk by the fire, and once again she felt the strange mixture of irritation and respect. This human never boasted, never tried to prove strength, yet his words carried a weight she could not ignore. The sound of rustling leaves came from their right. Then another from behind. Rava's grip tightened. She knew the danger. The Venom beasts hunted alone, but packs of their cousins, called shadowhounds, hunted together. They were smaller but faster, moving with silent steps and glowing eyes. Few hunters survived when a pack chose them as prey. The first shadowhound appeared between the trees, its body low to the ground, black fur blending into the jungle. Its eyes glowed faint green, watching with hunger. Another stepped into view, then another. Soon half a dozen circled the clearing. Rava stepped forward, her weapon ready. Her pride flared, and instinct told her to charge. But her body still carried weakness from the venom. She could not fight them all alone. She hated the thought, but she knew she must rely on Thomas. Thomas saw the way her muscles tensed. He spoke quickly. "If you rush them, they will take you down. We need a plan." "There is no time for plans," she growled. "There is always time," Thomas said firmly. He pointed to the trees around them. "They want us to panic. If we control where they come from, we control the fight." Rava hesitated. Strategy was not her way. She believed in strength, in the clash of blades and the roar of victory. Yet something in his calm voice made her pause. She gave a sharp nod. "Speak your plan, human." Thomas scanned the clearing. His eyes fell on a fallen log thick with vines. He moved quickly, pulling the vines loose. "These will hold." He tossed one to her. "We set traps. We guide them." Rava caught the vine and frowned. "You want me to bind beasts with rope?" "Not bind. Delay. Long enough for you to strike." Her pride resisted, but she saw the sense in his eyes. She gave a slow nod. Together they worked quickly, weaving vines between trees, setting snares in the undergrowth, shaping the clearing into a place of advantage. The hounds watched, their glowing eyes unblinking, their teeth flashing in the dim light. They were patient, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the last snare was set, Thomas moved to Rava's side. His blade was small compared to her weapon, but he held it ready. He met her eyes. "When they come, follow my lead. Strike when they are caught." Rava's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Do not fail me, human." The first hound leapt from the shadows, its claws slashing. Thomas stepped aside, guiding it into a snare. The vine tightened around its leg, yanking it off balance. Rava moved like lightning, her weapon cutting deep. The beast fell, and its cry echoed through the jungle. The pack howled in response. 3 more rushed from the trees. Thomas shouted, "Left!" He ducked low, swinging his blade to drive one into another trap. Rava struck again, her weapon flashing, her strength tearing through the beast. Another lunged at Thomas, teeth bared. He rolled aside, using the mud to slide under its leap, and stabbed upward with his blade. The hound snarled, wounded, but before it could recover, Rava's weapon ended it. She turned to see Thomas rising from the ground, covered in mud but alive. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and something unspoken passed between them. A warrior's respect. The last 2 hounds circled warily, their green eyes glowing with anger. They were smarter now, keeping distance, searching for weakness. Rava stepped forward, ready to face them. But Thomas held out a hand. "Wait, they are testing us. If we show fear, they will strike. If we show strength together, they will flee." Rava frowned. "You think they will retreat?" He nodded. "They hunt because they believe they can win. If they see they cannot, they will live to hunt another day." She considered his words. Among her people, enemies fought until death. But these were beasts, not warriors. Perhaps he was right. Together they stood tall, weapons ready, their eyes locked on the glowing hunters. For long moments the clearing was silent, but for the drip of rain. Then, as if by silent command, the hounds turned and slipped back into the shadows, disappearing into the jungle. Rava exhaled slowly, lowering her weapon. She looked at Thomas with surprise. "You guided the fight as if you were born to it." He shook his head. "I only used what the land gave us. Strength is not always in the arm. Sometimes it is in the mind." Her pride resisted, but her heart admitted the truth. Without his plan, she would have fallen. She stepped closer, her gaze sharp. "You are not what I thought a human to be. And you are not what I thought a huntress to be," Thomas said softly. For the first time since they met, Rava laughed, a short, sharp sound. It surprised her as much as him. Perhaps the galaxy is larger than both our beliefs. They left the clearing together, moving side by side. The jungle still held dangers, but something had changed. They no longer walked as hunter and fragile stranger. They walked as partners who had faced death together and endured. That night when they made camp, Rava sat by the fire, silent for a long time. She replayed the battle in her mind. The traps, the teamwork, the calm way Thomas had guided the fight. She realized that strength alone had not saved them. It had been his cleverness combined with her skill. Alone, either of them would have fallen. Together, they had triumphed. As the fire crackled and shadows danced across the trees, Rava spoke softly, almost to herself. "Perhaps strength takes many forms." Thomas, sitting across from her, nodded. "It does." The huntress stared into the flames, her pride and her heart slowly bending toward something new. She had been taught that only the strong survived, that help was weakness, that pride was everything. Yet now she began to see that strength could also be found in trust, in wisdom, in unity. And though she would never admit it aloud, she knew the truth. The human had changed her, and the shadows of the jungle had tested them both. Together they had passed. The jungle of Vera had grown quieter since the night of the Shadowhounds. The days passed with heavy skies and bright suns. Rain washed the land clean, and the air grew fresh with the scent of new life. Yet for Rava, the world no longer looked the same. She walked beside Thomas through the twisting paths of the forest. Each step carried less weakness now. The venom that once burned in her blood was gone, and her strength had returned. She felt her muscles ready again for battle, her senses sharp. But inside her, something had changed. She was no longer the same huntress who had entered this jungle with pride burning in her heart. She was no longer the warrior who believed that strength alone gave worth. The human had shown her something different. Thomas, with his calm voice and steady eyes, had guided her through death's shadow and given her reason to rise again. They traveled together with quiet steps. Often they spoke little, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was comfortable, as though each understood the other without words. Thomas would pause to study tracks or broken branches, and Rava would watch his methods with curiosity. He was no hunter in the way her people knew, yet he read the jungle with eyes that saw details others ignored. At times, she found herself asking questions she never thought she would ask. "Why do you risk yourself so easily?" "Because if we fear every risk, we live for nothing," Thomas would answer. "Do you never think of yourself first?" "I do, but I also think of others. If I can help, I should. That is enough." Simple words, yet they carried a weight that settled into her chest. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the sky with red light, they reached a ridge that overlooked a wide valley. The trees spread out below like an endless sea of green. Mist rose from the ground, curling toward the sky. At the far end of the valley stood a mountain of dark stone, its peak lost in the clouds. Rava paused at the sight. "That mountain. Beyond it lies the path back to my people." Thomas studied it. "Then your journey is almost done." She nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She should have felt pride in returning. Instead, she felt conflict. She knew her people would see Thomas as nothing more than a fragile outsider. They would not understand what he had done for her. They would not respect him as she now did. That night, they camped near the ridge. The firelight flickered across Rava's face as she stared into the flames. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "When I return, my people will ask how I survived. They will ask how the venom did not kill me. They will ask how I defeated the hounds." Thomas looked at her calmly. "And what will you tell them?" Rava was silent for a long time. Then she said, "The truth." He raised an eyebrow. "That a human saved you?" "Yes," she answered firmly. "That is the truth." Thomas shook his head slightly. They may not believe you. Let them doubt, Rava said. I will not lie. You risked yourself when no one else would. You guided us when I could not. I will not take that from you. For the first time since they met, Thomas looked at her with surprise. Then he smiled faintly. Then maybe your people will see that humans are not so weak after all. The next day, as they began the climb toward the mountain, the jungle gave them one last test. From the shadows of the trees emerged a beast larger than any they had faced. Its scales shone like armor, its eyes glowed red, and its roar shook the air. It was a creature of legend, known among Rava's people as the Doom of Hunters. Few had ever faced it and lived. Rava gripped her weapon, her heart steady. This was the final trial. She glanced at Thomas, and he met her gaze without fear. Together, he said. Together, she agreed. The beast charged, its claws tearing the earth. Rava leapt to meet it, her blade flashing while Thomas moved swiftly to its side, striking where its armor was weakest. They fought not as warrior and fragile human, but as one. Each move flowed into the next, each strike timed with trust. The battle raged, but in the end, the beast fell. Rava stood tall, her chest rising with breath, her weapon dripping with victory. Thomas leaned against a tree, weary but alive. Their eyes met, and both knew the truth. Alone, neither would have survived. Together, they had triumphed. When the mountain path finally opened before them, Rava felt pride swell in her chest. Not the pride of her old ways, but a new pride born of trust, courage, and unity. She turned to Thomas. You have my respect, human. More than that, you have my gratitude. I will not forget, Thomas gave a small nod. And I will not forget the Huntress who fought beside me. As they walked the last stretch of their journey, the sky cleared, and stars began to shine above the jungle. Rava lifted her gaze to them. Once she had seen the stars only as trophies to conquer, as places to prove her strength. Now she saw them differently. She saw them as endless paths, each holding new lessons, new truths. She realized that Thomas had not only saved her life, he had changed how she saw the galaxy. Strength was not only in the arm or the blade. Strength could be in the heart, in the mind, in the courage to act when all seemed lost. When she returned to her people, she would speak of this truth. She would tell them of the human who sucked the venom from her wound and gave her life. She would tell them of the human who guided her through the shadow hounds and stood with her against the beast of legend. And she would tell them that humanity was not weak, but strong in ways no one expected. The fire of her old pride burned less fiercely, replaced by something greater: respect, understanding, and hope. As the stars shone brighter above, Rava walked beside Thomas, knowing the galaxy had shifted. For her people, and perhaps for all who would one day learn of the human's courage. And so the Huntress who had once believed only in strength now carried a new truth within her heart. A truth that began with a single act of compassion and grew into something that might change the fate of stars.